Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our virtual STEM camp for Expedition Carolina. We are very excited to have you with us today to learn about the research that we're doing on this expedition and to hear about the journey that we've taken over the past 9 years. Before we get started, I do want to thank our education sponsors, Landry's and Blundstone. They really enable us to do things like this and bring education into the lives of all of our students. So today we're going to start by having our founder and Chris Fisher. So hi, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning from Charleston, South Carolina.
So Chris, if you can go ahead and just tell us a little bit about the importance of Mary Lee and some of the kind of highlights for what we're going to be doing on this expedition.
Sure. Well, Mary Lee, wow. I mean, when you really think back, we tagged Mary Lee in the fall of 2012, and that was the first expedition that we went on to try to begin to solve the puzzle of the great white sharks that live off the east coast of the United States. And it turns out also a lot in Atlantic Canada. But back then, we didn't know about Atlantic Canada. That very first year we went up there, man, I remember kind of like the fear of the unknown. I remember like not knowing if we were going to be able to find one. You got to remember back in 2012, there were just a few sharks showing up around Cape Cod, and it wasn't like it is now, right? It was the beginning of this rebuilding of slow, steady recovery of our white sharks in association with all the seals up there. And Mary Lee, I got to be honest with you, with Mary Lee, there's all these little inside journeys that occurred on OCEARCH. I thought that Mary Lee was going to be the last shark that we ever touched. We had just returned back from Africa, where we had tagged 40 white sharks down there. At the time, television was funding a lot of our work, and the television was going away. And we didn't really know if we were going to be able to find the funding to keep operating. And I had promised the people up in the northeastern United States I would help them. So even though we didn't have a gig, we went there trying to help them, even if it was the last thing we did. And the first shark we caught on that trip was a shark named Jeannie. We named after Jeannie Clark, famous marine biologist out of Mote Marine Laboratory, the shark lady, right? And we wanted to honor her with the first, white shark tagged in history with a spot tag like that. Off the eastern seaboard. And when I left, this is just kind of insider, when I left with Mary Lee, that expedition, that trip, I actually took a picture of the ship, named that shark Mary Lee after my mom, because I really thought it was the end of OCEARCH at the time. And Mary Lee proceeded to basically cruise down the east coast of the United States and really, for lack of a better word, she saved OCEARCH. She was the first shark that was really coastal, that just engaged with the communities going up and down the beaches, and people suddenly just fell in love with Mary Lee. And they started to wonder, what's Mary Lee doing? Why is she here? Instead of the old kind of like traditional fear that you would see around white sharks. Because I think it's important to note, like when we're doing the work we're doing, we're solving the science puzzle, but we also need to shift the tone of the conversation around white sharks at the same time, so people understand we don't need to be afraid of them. In fact, they're the guardians of our fish stocks. Well, without them, the seals are going to wipe out our fish stocks. The squid are going to wipe out our fish stocks. And as the white sharks go, we go. So if they're doing well, we do well. And I think people really started to get that with Mary Lee. When she moved down the coast, she was so coastal, and she led us to Jacksonville, Florida at the time. And believe it or not, back then in 2012, people would say, like, there's not really white sharks in Florida. And now we know that they all overwinter down there. So we've learned so much just in the past 10 years, from basically very little understanding to a pretty complete understanding of their full life history. And Mary Lee was one of the key sharks that did that. Number one, she showed us the winter habitat where they're coming down and overwintering off the southeastern United States and Atlantic, northeast Florida, and really all the way around into the Gulf of Mexico for a smaller percentage of the sharks. She showed us some of this movements offshore that we'd not seen from big females before. And one of the things that she really showed us was when she made this move, where you can see almost where her last ping was back in 2017 in June, making that move into the New York, New Jersey bight right there underneath the bottom end of Long Island. And that track of a big mature female coming in from offshore, along with the great work that had been done previously by Jack Casey, and then was being picked up by really the great work Dr. Toby Curtis is doing out of NOAA, who's another one of our team members. Those kind of little pieces of puzzle led us to believe, like, man, this could be the birthing area, the important nursery area. So we went in there following Mary Lee after she had showed us the whole Florida component of the puzzle. And we went in there and we were able to catch 20 young of the year and 1-year-old sharks, very young sharks, and really kind of confirm the work of Jack Casey with Toby Curtis on identifying this birthing area where their young of the year are spending their first months of their lives, and then how they move down to the Carolinas, which is a paper we just published a week or so that Toby led the charge on, and showing that the full range of the baby white shark is moving between, the South Shore, Long Island, the Montauk region, the Jersey Shore, and all the way down to South Carolina. So Mary Lee not only inspired the East Coast around OCEARCH work, began shifting the tone of the conversation from one of fear to one of understanding and one of realizing, the biggest thing we need to be afraid of is if these large sharks aren't thriving, shifting the tone of the conversation. She was instrumental in that, as well as revealing these first clues to the life history puzzle of the white shark. After Mary Lee made that first trip down south and the whole, Mary Lee was clever. She started her own Twitter handle. She had like 150,000 Twitter followers. People were begging for Mary Lee to come visiting. And we're talking about a 16.5-foot, 3,500-pound mature female great white shark, by the way. But people were loving up on her like she was a little teddy bear or a unicorn or something. And it changed everything for OCEARCH. And really, the explosion around Mary Lee, what subsequently happened for that was Caterpillar came in. Caterpillar engines, because we have those engines on the ship, and they funded our work and for a few years and really gave us the lift we needed. And that sequence of events from Mary Lee, not only revealing her life to the public so they could fall in love with her, but revealing the pieces of the puzzle to us so we could begin to assemble the data we need to manage all these animals back. And being named after my mom, there's just so many. If you ever feel like things were meant to happen and you happen to name a shark after your mom, and then that shark happens to turn it around for the whole group so that you have a future, there's a lot going on with Mary Lee on just the straight science level, the communications level, and really also an emotional level for me personally. My mom is still alive. She's 88 years old. And, she asks about Mary Lee. Her name is Mary Lee Fisher. And, it has just been a magical journey with that particular shark, and quite frankly, a journey that without that shark, I'm not sure we would all still be here.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's always inspiring to hear the whole story of OCEARCH, especially starting with Mary Lee. We did have a quick question about Mary Lee. Her last ping was on June 17th, 2017. What can you explain just quickly why she is no longer pinging in?
Sure. So when we put a tag on these animals, it has a 5-year battery. And we tagged Mary Lee in 2012, and her battery expired in 2017. And she gave us a beautiful full 5-year track, which allowed us to really begin digging in to like what parts of her track do we need to go explore to find other sharks and figure out where she's mating, where she's birthing. And so it was just a beautiful 5-year track. And, people said, you can never really go out and try to find a shark again. Basically you'd have to be out working and it just swims up to you, right? It would have to be a gift from the ocean, right? The ocean is too vast. You would never really be able to go out and specifically find one of these individual sharks. And people ask about that. And, I kind of feel like, it's good for Mary Lee to have her privacy back. Like, she gave up 5 years of her lives to help us understand what's going on. She gave us an extraordinary amount of data, which allowed us to be where we are now. She saved the business. She shifted the tone of the conversation around white sharks on the East Coast from one of fear to one of fascination and appreciation. And, for me, it was like, it's time for Mary Lee to have her privacy back and have her life back. I'd never really felt like, trying to hold on to that with her. I mean, she gave us so many gifts. It's almost you can't ask for anymore. But the one great thing is when you look at Mary Lee's track, you can figure out whereabouts, general area-wise, where she should be now, right? So it's 2022. It's an even numbered year. She has kind of a 2-year migratory loop, right? Because she's a mature female who has her gestation. You know, she should be mating around now, right? You know, sometime in this March, April time frame off the Carolinas. And if you look at a track in the past on an even numbered year around this time of year and see where she was, she'll be in that same general area now. These animals are repeating their migratory paths almost to the same spots and the same locations year over year. For a big mature female like that, you've got to look at the even numbered years differently than the odd number years, because it's a 2-year migration. If it was 2023, we'd want to look to see where was she in 2019 in March, right? But since it's 2022, where was she in 2018 or 2020 during March? And she'll be in those same general areas. So that's been the most powerful thing about understanding these animals. Their capacity to navigate is unbelievable. Their calendar is super accurate. Like, right, think about this. Why are we here now? Why do I think, along with some of the scientists, this time to be here? Well, our data indicates that they could be mating in this area with the hormone levels from their blood and the sperm samples from the males. But also, coming up, I don't know if anybody knows what's getting ready to happen around, I think it's March 27th or March 21st, is the vernal equinox, right? The spring equinox, when the length of the day is the exact same as the length of the night, right? The pivot from coming out of winter and moving into spring. These animals are so dialed in to things like the moon and the spring equinox and the fall equinox that we believe that it triggers these certain sorts of activities. They know that the summer is coming. They can feel that, oh, the day is about as long as the night. The nights are no longer a lot longer than the days, right? So it's like time to pivot our activity. Could this trigger mating? So we go into a little bit of mating, and then the summer comes and they migrate out to forage in the open ocean for the pregnant females in the summer months for about, you know, let's say 15 months before they go into the New York, New Jersey bite and drop off their pups. So the timing of things, and when you're talking about like, why doesn't Mary Lee ping anymore? Well, the battery expired, but because she's such an amazing navigator with such an amazing calendar built into her body, her system, we can have a general idea where she is now, especially when you just need the kind of idea from a management standpoint. So what an amazing gift in my life. I just can't imagine that there will be anything ever remotely close to another Mary Lee. Now, maybe it will happen when we go to a place and catch the first shark in history over off somewhere in Western Europe or in the UK, and that one shark is the shark that opens up that conversation and begins to teach us there. But up until this moment, there's just been no shark like her. That she's been the most, I would say, most important fish ever caught and shared with the world in human history as far as her impact.
I agree with that, especially speaking on education, because she really brought to life for kids the importance of doing research. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences with Mary Lee and the story of OCEARCH. We will bring back in a little while because we'll do some Q&A at the end. So if you do have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. You know, the more broad the question or the more exciting the question, the more likely we are to put it in, just so that we can answer some things that maybe we haven't answered so much in the past. So up next, we are joined by another one of our education ambassadors, Kara. And she is going to go through one of our activities that you can find in our Expedition Carolina STEM packet, where we're going to, again, Mary Lee is going to kind of be the theme of the day because she's such an important shark. So we're going to go over a 3rd through 5th grade activity where you're going to do fractions with Mary Lee. So if you like this activity, you can go ahead and download the packet and you can explore yourself. So Kara, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to be modeling the Math with Mary Lee out of the packet. It's the first activity in the packet. And it's focused around using the OCEARCH shark tracker to look at the different sharks in particular area. We're going to be looking and focusing on the white sharks here in the Atlantic, where we're currently set up here in Charleston, and going to be doing the expeditions here in the Carolinas. So the activity revolves around looking at the last 8 recently pinged white sharks this morning. So we have up-to-date information on the last 8 that have come up and given us a good kind of ping satellite image this morning. Pulling up the tracker, the very first one here that has pinged in, or the most recent one that has pinged in actually early this morning, was Scott. And so this is all working about fractions. We're using the last 8 recently pinged white sharks. And so I'm going to kind of create that little piece here, kind of create that circle chart that shows all the different pieces up here. The activities centered around looking at whether they are male or female white sharks. And so here, Scott was the very most recent one that pinged in this morning around 7 a.m. We have Hallie, who was the next one who had pinged in late last night. We're going to put her up here, like so. Next one that we have that pinged in was Breton, who also pinged in late last night, and he happens to be a male. So we're kind of grouping the males here and then the females. After that, we have Andromache, who's a female. I'm going to add her right here. We have Rose as well. We're going to add her. That is a female. Keji is a male who recently tagged in. We're going to add him over here, kind of grouping again the males and the females here on this kind of pie chart that we're creating. We have Olympia, who's a female right here. And then Gladdy was finally the last of those kind of 8 most recent sharks that have pinged in here for us. And so this creates this kind of nice pie chart. We see it's one whole piece, but we can look at the fractions and break down the males versus the females. Here we can count that there were 1, 2, 3 males. So 3 out of 8 of the most recent white sharks that have tagged in are male. And you can look over here and see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the most recent sharks were females that tagged in. This is looking only at the most recent 8 white sharks that have tagged in. You could certainly extend this activity and look at the last 16. You could simplify it and look at the last 4. Other extensions that you could do off this activity is not just looking at gender, but you could look at different species of sharks. So we could look at blue sharks, tiger sharks, and great whites all together and compare how many of each of those species have recently pinged in. You could also keep it specific to just the white sharks, but have it be something where your students are using the tracker to look at, okay, how many of the Atlantic sharks have pinged in versus the Pacific sharks, and be able to create this kind of similar pie chart here. And then you could also talk about the white sharks in the Atlantic are probably pinging in a little bit more frequently than the ones in the Pacific, and that's simply because the ones in the Pacific, they have that 5-year battery life on those tags. Those tags are probably not active anymore, and so you can discuss kind of the science and the research behind and the importance behind tagging these sharks and looking at the particular tracks that they take. So there's many different ways that you can expand off of this depending on your grade level. Like I said, you can make it a lot more simple than this. You could also build it up and make it something where your students are interacting with the tracker a little bit more and bringing in more of the biology and the science and the importance of these animals into that lesson that you do in your classroom.
So something I like about this for using in the classroom is that it is hands-on. So if you have a student or a child that's struggling a little bit with math, this is a great way for them to visualize the application, fractions, right? So I'm dealing with that with my own kid right now. It's a little bit of a struggle to do fractions. So making it visually appealing and hands-on and manipulative really helps with some of those complex math problems that they might have to do as they move up in their education. So this is a great way for you to interact with the tracker while also making math really fun. So thank you so much, Kara. Well,
No problem.
Carol will be joining us again here in a minute as well to do some Q&A. So the next thing we're going to do is really look at that last piece of the puzzle. We heard all about Mary Lee and her amazing journey that she took to bring us here to where we're at now. So something that, I reflected on when I was writing this packet was this has been 9 years of exploration here in the Northwest Atlantic. We were trying to get 100 sharks to answer 100 questions. And the research that's gone on really, like we said, started with just one shark, Mary Lee. And the most amazing thing about OCEARCH for me is that it was possible because of collaboration and resources provided by partners, as well as the team's dedication. That collaboration piece in science is really important because this research would have normally taken 20 years. But because we had such a group of scientists working in a massive collaborative effort, we were able to accomplish it in 9. This journey of Mary Lee took us to Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, New York, and Nova Scotia. We're wrapping up this puzzle by being in Charleston today. We will also be heading back down to Savannah at the end of the month. So if you're interested in ship tours or seeing the ship, make sure you follow us on social media so that you can follow along and see when we're offering that down in Savannah. So some of the most impactful sharks that we have tagged outside of Mary Lee, Catherine, she is a massive one. So what Mary Lee did for the Carolina area, Catherine did for Florida. She really brought a lot of positive coverage here. I'm actually in Florida, and the coverage that Catherine got just brought such an awareness to sharks. Similar like Mary Lee, both of their Twitters exploded. They had a big following, and people just loved to see what they were doing next. Hilton was another one that was really important for us. He's a male shark. He showed us a bunch of different tracks that the females weren't showing us. So we were able to tie in that piece of the puzzle as well. Lydia gave us some data that was outside the norm of what the other sharks were showing us, which is also important when looking in science because sometimes things don't happen the way that they're predicted, and you can learn from that and grow. Lydia is actually my favorite shark because she's a Florida girl. She was tagged here. And then, of course, we have Mary Lee. So in this activity, you can read more about the importance of these sharks, look at their tracks, and go ahead and do your own summary of our journey that we've taken here on the Northwest Atlantic. So with this, we're going to go ahead and open up to questions. So go ahead and type them in the comments, and then we will go ahead and start answering them. I wanted to thank our sponsors again. So thank you so much, Landry's and Blundstone, for your support of education. Without them, we cannot provide programming like this to students. While we're waiting for some questions, I do want to let you know that if you have any questions about education programs, or you'd like to have maybe a Zoom session with one of us, go ahead and email us at education@ocearch.org. And as always, you can follow along with us on the tracker at www.ocearch.org. So all right, so we do have our first question. I'm going to go ahead and bring everybody back in. So David's asking, what's next?
Before we jump into the question, you listed so many iconic sharks, and if people want to start to look into their lives and what is the most important thing about those sharks, I think there's some other things to mention. So you totally nailed Catherine. Catherine was one of the other sharks that was key to shifting the tone of the conversation. I mean, she was a Florida girl. She lived on the Florida beaches. People fell in love with Catherine. She was she was in the press everywhere. What Catherine was, I think, super exciting about Catherine, I believe, is the first year she was tagged, we believe that she wasn't a mature animal. So when you look at her migratory loop, she had a 1-year migratory loop to and from the northeastern United States, the Cape Cod region. But then something happened the next year. She either kind of became a mature shark, and she transitioned into showing us that these mature females have a 2-year migratory loop, but we caught the last of her 1-year migratory loop. So very interesting to watch maybe an animal transition from an immature female to a mature female and watch how her track changed between her first year and the years then that came after it. When you mentioned a shark like Hilton, what are the things to look at with Hilton? Like you said, Hilton showed us Atlantic Canada was a huge part of the puzzle. We wouldn't have found Ironbound Island or Mahone Bay or any of that stuff if it wasn't for Hilton that we tagged off Hilton Head Island in South Carolina. Hilton also gave us another very big clue. Hilton gave us our first big, real, viable sperm sample. That really was the first clue that something different was tagging off the Carolinas than anywhere else where we were tagging these animals. We did not see that from mature male animals in any other region. So Hilton, hugely important. And then Lydia, caught right in front of the Mayport Poles in Jacksonville, really led down there by Mary Lee, following Mary Lee, who went to Jacksonville, and then led us to Lydia. Lydia started for the first time to show us about this big offshore pelagic movement, right? That these big females were moving offshore, and it was only big females. And she is the first shark that was tracked out to the mid-Atlantic ridge and actually slightly crossed over into the eastern and northeastern Atlantic versus the northwestern Atlantic. So hugely, and also Lydia showed us Newfoundland. And we're going to Newfoundland for the first time this coming July. What's going on in Newfoundland? Is it the same thing as Nova Scotia? Are there a body of sharks that go from Newfoundland to the southeastern United States where they overwinter and not even going by Nova Scotia or going by the eastern seaboard? They just have a completely different migratory route. So we'll learn something that Lydia showed us. Sometimes when these sharks show you things, it takes a while to actually get the ship there to follow up on the question, but we do that. So Lydia, another hugely important shark. So it is really interesting when you have 83 sharks or so to try to solve this complicated puzzle, how there were really those few critical sharks that provided you that tipping point, that clue, that lead that you had to go investigate and explore in a new area, which assembled the puzzle. So there's a lot in those sharks if you really start to look into what makes them special.
Absolutely. And if you look at those mature females too, and you look at the way that their tracks move, you see a lot of those patterns emerging as well. So for the students and teachers watching, definitely go check out this activity because it really brings to life the journey that OCEARCH has been on for the past 9 years. All right, so we kind of already answered this a little bit, but what is next in the research?
Well, we're wrapping up our work off the east coast of the United States and Atlantic Canada between this expedition and our next expedition in Newfoundland in July. And that really puts an end to what began in 2012 with Mary Lee, which is putting together the life history puzzle of our white sharks off the East Coast. Why are we doing that? Well, we know if we can manage our white sharks and we keep them moving in the right direction, all the all the fish stocks will flourish. So if the Mary Lees off our East Coast are doing well, we are going to do well. We're going to see an ocean full of fish. We're going to have an operating system in our ocean, which makes our air and our water, and we're going to be able to eat fresh fish in a sustainable way. And so the story off the East Coast is like one of the best stories in the world right now, right? Our East Coast of the United States is returning to abundance. Our shark populations are slowly recovering. Our fish populations are doing very well, growing. The fishing and the fish we're seeing off the eastern seaboard of the United States is things we haven't seen in 60 or 80 years. I mean, there's more fish now than there was when our great granddaddies were alive. And I don't think most people know that. So a moment to be celebrated off the East Coast of the United States. The great work done by the states and by NOAA and management decisions made in the late 80s and 90s is playing huge dividends right now. After those two expeditions, because we got things moving in the right direction here, we just need to keep doing what we're doing and focus on the few challenges like the northern right whale and other things we have left. We're moving over in September to begin solving the life history puzzle of the white sharks that live on the opposite side of the Atlantic Ocean, right? We're going to move over to the eastern portion of the North Atlantic. We've been in the western portion, which is our part. And we're going to begin to try to solve the life history puzzle of the Mediterranean white shark. And we believe that the Mediterranean white sharks will be overwintering in the Med, much like they do off the southeastern United States. And then in the summer and fall, they're going to be moving north to find marine mammals to bulk up for the oncoming winter and prepare to mate in the late winter and spring the following year. So we're going to begin investigating what's going on off Scotland, Ireland, and England, and potentially even northwestern France, down in Brittany, France, trying to see if that is where the white sharks of the Med have their summer and fall feeding aggregations. Now, this is going to be by far the most difficult thing we do, and this is a whole different type of project than we have on our side of the Atlantic. Over there, we're just not sure if there's enough white sharks left to even find one. Right, we're in the middle over here of a nice recovery, slow recovery. Over there, we have to try to determine the data to try to save the population of white sharks, to try to bring it back from the brink of extinction. So it's going to be very hard. It's going to be the most difficult thing just to find one. But because of what we've learned on the East Coast about the rhythm of their lives and the time of year that they're mating, the time of year that they're birthing, the time of year that they're foraging in the summer and fall, we're hoping we'll be able to solve the life history puzzle of the Mediterranean white shark. Where is it mating? Where is it birthing? Where is the nursery, right? Where's the foraging areas in the summer and fall? We're hoping instead of needing to catch 100 sharks to solve that puzzle, because trying to catch 100 sharks over there may or may not even be possible. We're hoping that we'll be able to solve that puzzle maybe by catching 30 sharks, because of all the knowledge we've gained to put that puzzle together with the same sort of timing of their lives that we now understand, the rhythm and the timing of their annual calendar. So we'll be spending the next few years moving between kind of the UK and Western Europe and the Mediterranean, trying to do the very same thing we've just completed here, so that we have a chance, just a chance, to bring the Mediterranean back, right? We have to look, we're going over to solve the puzzle of the Mediterranean white shark, and we're going to do that. But we're really going over there to try to inspire a continent to imagine an abundant Med, so that even if it takes us 50 years, we can turn the corner now, and we can leverage the interest in the white sharks to try to get that whole community imagining an abundant Med for their great-grandchildren, because the Med is in a bad, bad place. And you know, if we don't do it, then who? If not us, then who? So, you know, we need to come together and do it. And we need to go over there, handle our work, but leverage the open sourcing of that work, the charismatic nature of the white shark and the work, to really begin to inspire the whole region, because we've shown in just 30 years what you can do. In the East Coast, it's been 30 years, and our East Coast is teeming. It's turning into one of the great wild oceans. And we hope we can inspire those sorts of moves over there, so that in 30 years, 50 years, the Med is full of life again. I mean, on the East Coast, we have whales in front of the Statue of Liberty again. We catch tuna in front of the Statue of Liberty. You can catch white marlin off the south shore of Nantucket again. The bill fishing off southeastern Florida is as good as any remote location in the world, but in just 30 years we did that. And so we need to show that to the world and inspire the rest of the world to really begin to take some of these, so that we have an operating mission, which is delivering us our air, our water, and our food, really, so that there's a place for our children to live that we're proud of. And that's why we're going over there. Yes, we're going to do the white shark work. Yes, we're going to solve that puzzle, but we can do more as we open source and include the world in that journey, and that's what we're going to go do.
Thank you so much. So we had a question of how old we think Mary Lee is, and I want to add to that. Can you sort of explain how we get that idea of how old sharks are?
Well, we know these white sharks live to be at least 70 years old, right? And, you know, we know that these animals aren't sexually mature till they're about 20 years old. A 20-year-old female white shark could be 12 and a half, 13 feet, just becoming sexually mature. You know, so if you're looking at a 12 and a half or 13, 14 foot female white shark, and you know she's approximately 20 because she's just coming into being sexually mature, which you can tell from ultrasounds. You can also just tell kind of by looking at them, right? Because mating is really violent, right? So when you catch these female white sharks and their bodies are just super clean and perfect, there's not a blemish on their body, you know that they're not sexually mature yet, right? Because once they begin to mate and they begin to get lots of scars on their body. So you can see a fish, and it could be a 13-foot fish, and it's just perfect and clean and not a mark on it. You're like, yeah, no, this one, though it's long enough, doesn't look like it began to engage in mating yet, because we would begin to see the scars all across her body from mating. So if you take that kind of a benchmark, you're looking at a 13-foot, 20-year-old shark, maybe that weighs somewhere around 14 to 1,800 pounds, 1,200 to 1,800 pounds. And then all of a sudden now you're dealing with an animal that's 17 feet and closer to 4,000 pounds, right? And they grow so slowly. You begin to see, like, look at the body of an animal like that. The story of its life is on its bodies with the scars and the scratches. And you can see the years of everything it's had to endure. And you can start to see almost the cycles of those scars and the decades of those scars on top of scars. And you're like, wow, this is an ancient animal. I mean, you can feel it when you're standing next to it. And, you know, when you look at a shark, I still think we're vastly underestimating their age. You know, a shark like Mary Lee, we would have, you know, even at the time in 2012 when we tagged her, you would have well over 50, right? You know, there's no reason for these sharks not to be 90 or 100 or 100. I mean, we're the only thing in the odd orca, which doesn't happen that often, that's going to really eliminate them. So you're trying to put together these clues of the science where we know they live to be at least 70. This 20-year-old animal looks like this, like, whoa, look at this thing. It looks like it's 4 times older than that animal we knew was 20 years old. And so you're kind of really trying to assemble the puzzle just on standing next to a bunch of sharks, putting a few of these life history general rules together. And then in the end, you're really making your best guess, because the only way to really tell the age of these animals is by counting the rings in their spinal cord. And you can only do that from a dead white shark. Well, OCEARCH doesn't really work in the dead white shark space, right? You know, there's much to be learned when you have an unfortunate, you know, situation like that for the scientists to be learned, but that's generally speaking not anything we're pursuing. You know, what would be the value in that when we know we can get spinal cords from animals that are accidentally caught and captured in other types of gear, right? And you just wait for those moments that are unfortunate, but you can then learn from them. And so it's kind of a part of the research that we don't really need to participate in. So I think, you know, that's the best way I can tell you. The best way I can tell you is you get a feeling for it when you've stood next to hundreds of them, you know, and you've handled hundreds of them, because sometimes these bigger females come in and they just make you feel so small and so insignificant, and they feel so ancient that you're like, wow, like, you know, like a Nagumi, a Mary Lee. You say this shark's at least 50, and really I'm thinking in my head it's over 75, but I'm kind of like afraid to say that publicly, right? But I know it's way over 50, you know. And so I think that's the best way, you know, just by looking at them. And I think one of the things I would encourage people, if you go back and you're looking at sharks, really stop for a minute, slow down, and zoom in and look at their bodies. Look at their face and see the seal scratches on their face from the seals trying to get away while they were eating them. Look at the scars across their gills that occurred probably when they were mating, and how they've healed up, and you can tell it's an ancient scar, right? And then you'll see fresher scars. And if you really slow down and zoom in from like the big view of the shark into little parts of the shark and really look at it, you'll start to see the story of their life. And lots of clues there that oftentimes get missed when you're just kind of looking at the shark from a big picture standpoint. There's just so much there. It's like a novel.
Yeah, so it's following the clues and seeing what's going on them. It's a lot more than just taking a quick picture of the tag. You know, we do have a lot of images available all over social media, so you can kind of go on there and look at some of those sharks and zoom in, like Chris is saying, and see what clues that you're finding. So Chris, I just have one question before we wrap up for you. You know, we have some students watching and teachers. So yeah, as we're beginning are wrapping up this journey and beginning a new one, what's one piece of advice that you would give the kids watching about how they can inspire some of that change?
Well, the biggest thing I think with the kids is, we have to become individually accountable for the kind of, I would say, the tracks that we leave behind on our life. So if all of us are just make our journey through our lives and try to be as efficient as we can and clean up behind ourselves and not make a big mess and not buy a bunch of excess things we have to throw away eventually, and just lead like a really efficient, clean life. And if you see garbage on the ground, pick it up when you're walking by, because you know what? Then it's not there next time. And over time, it becomes powerful. Be a part of turning the tide, so that we all begin with our individual relationship on our journey, having it be the most fulfilling life we want, but also not like, don't leave a bunch of junk behind you along the way. Clean up after yourself, and don't get a bunch of things you don't need. Be efficient with your life, minimize your waste, and we'll all be okay if everybody can just try to be an efficient person, an efficient earthling on their journey. And that starts with, using a cup instead of a bunch of plastic bottles. You don't bring home a bunch of cartons of stuff you're not going to eat and then throw it away out of the kitchen fridge when you come home from eating because you ordered too much food. Order less. I tell you what, it's gotten so crazy with my family. Nowadays, you go to a restaurant, if there's 5 or 6 people and you order 5 or 6 meals, you got enough food to feed like 10 people. It's crazy. Like our test and our challenge in our family is, all right, there's 4 or 5 of us here. It depends on who's there. We're going to try to order only what we need that's all gets eaten. So there's not a bunch of leftover food. There's not a bunch of leftover cartons we then carry home and then throw away because we didn't eat it within a day, and have really tried to get into this game of being as efficient as we can be. And a couple of things happen. Like, it's really just awareness. Once you start thinking like that, you become aware of like all this waste around us that doesn't need to exist, a lot of which ends up in the ocean. And also you end up saving a bunch of money. You end up not wasting money all the time because you're like thinking about, okay, we're going to share. There's 6 of us here. We're going to get 4 meals and share them and eat it all. We'll all be stuffed anyway. And then we have no more waste to carry home. So little games like that you can play with your family to try to minimize our waste on our journeys and be what I like to say is try to be the most efficient earthling you can be, so that across your life journey, your impact is more positive than negative when you're with your relationship with the planet. In the end, if we can get everyone thinking like that, then the plastic bottle issue takes care of itself. The garbage takes care of itself, because we're all in it to win it at every level along. And it becomes our lifestyle.
Yeah, there's a really good quote that it's not one person doing everything, it's everyone doing small things. And that's exactly right. Just there's so many little attainable things that you can do in your own life. And in the long run, it's going to help. And you can be an inspiration for change, just like what OCEARCH is doing. So
I think it's an inspiration just when you're walking down the street and you see a young person or anyone just bend over and pick up a piece of garbage. Mm-hmm. Everyone else who sees it, who walked by that, they're like, yeah, why didn't I do that?
Yeah.
Those are big, big things. Leadership it takes form in many small ways.
And you don't have to live by the ocean to do that. You can be anywhere.
Oh yeah, no, if it's going into the creek, it's going to end up in the ocean no matter where you are. I love what you all do, and I'm so grateful for the education component and integrating it with the science and the exploration. And it's a real privilege for us to be a part of this with everyone. And I just wanted to say thank you to all the educators and all the students and all the parents out there that are getting their kids involved.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, everyone. You can also catch this on our YouTube channel, and it'll be on Facebook. Again, if you have any questions, you can email us at education@ocearch.org. Make sure you go and check out this full STEM packet. It's available on our website. And if you're in the Savannah area at the end of the month, come check us out. Follow us along on social media and see where we're going to be and when we'll have some ship tours available. So thank you, Chris and Kara. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Off to expedition now. Follow along on the social platforms. We start angling tomorrow.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Kara.